Tim, perhaps I should begin by asking you how the idea of Chess came about, the musical came about.
Well, quite some time ago, before I ever met Björn and Benny, I'd had the idea of doing a musical which involved the East-West conflict, but I didn't want to do a thing that was a nuclear Holocaust type project. I was just keen to tell a story about people caught up in the problems of East and West. And sometime after that vague thought, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when reading about, I think, Korchnoi and Karpov, because although they're both Russians, Korchnoi was representing the West, having defected from the East. I suddenly thought, well, Chess is a very good basic scenario for an East-West story, because it's small, in the sense that you can get involved with real people, and you can tell a fairly intimate story, but yet the issues behind it are large. And so I wrote, totally on my own, a very, very rough outline of a possible story. And I then didn't really have anybody to write the music. And by chance, when I was in New York, I heard through an American theatrical producer that Björn and Benny were thinking of branching away from ABBA, for the time being anyway, in order to write for the theatre. And when I heard about this, I was obviously very enthusiastic, knowing their work very well. And in due course, a meeting was arranged.
But at that point, their work, as you had known it, was from ABBA and a whole string of hit singles, beginning with Waterloo. And so, in a sense, they were composers of music that were of pop songs rather than, say, of musicals. Writing songs for the charts are entirely different to, say, writing songs that are going to be featured in a full-length theatrical production.
Well, I think if you only listen to ABBA's greatest hits, just the singles, you know, on one hearing you might be stupid enough to think it was just pop songs. But if you listen to any of the last 3 or 4 albums, and indeed the last few singles, and you listen to the orchestrations, the arrangements of production, vocal tricks, everything on it, you realize there's a lot more going. I mean, frankly, Waterloo was about the one ABBA record I didn't really like. I mean, I can say that frankly now. But after Waterloo, I mean, I can remember so clearly with my wife in the car when about the time Fernando came out saying, these guys are actually much better than most. You know, it was after about 4 or 5, I thought, hang on. And if you listen to The Visitors or Super Trooper, which is, I think, my favourite ABBA album, you hear so much more. And I got the feeling, before I knew them, that there was a lot waiting to burst out, and they were a bit restricted to doing everything in 4-minute segments. And it's very difficult with their enormous popularity and the format. They were having to write mini masterpieces, which had to be sung. When you've heard Björn sing, you understand what they had to be sung by the 2 girls. And had to be fairly instant, you know, pop hits. Didn't have to be, but I mean they were. But I felt behind all that, which was done immaculately, there was a much bigger thing waiting to escape. And I think they've done that in this piece. They've got the opportunity to paint on a wider canvas.
Now, Björn, you heard that Tim was looking for people to work with. How did you feel yourself about working with Tim Rice, who you'd obviously known from working with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Stephen Oliver on various theatrical and musical productions?
Well, we had talked about writing a musical for a long time, about 5 years. And we were just looking for the right idea and the right person to do it with, because we had no experience in the theatrical field. So we were delighted to hear that Tim was interested, and once we got together we found out we were, you know, the same type of people, really. And it took us a year to decide, but we both of us thought he must be the best one we could work with.
Tell us how the songwriting came together, the musical side of it. Did you just write the music yourselves and then offer the melodies to Tim for him to write the lyrics, or did you write basic lyrical ideas as well as at the same time as writing the music?
Well, of course, to start with, there was a synopsis, a short basic synopsis that Tim had written, and we tried to begin with, structure that so that we knew what kind of songs we needed and when they were needed. And so we started writing the music to that. And we gave the music together with basic nonsense lyrics to Tim, and he started writing lyrics.
Question, most obvious question, perhaps, Tim, is that chess, about chess playing. Chess isn't the most dramatic of games. I could imagine writing a musical about a football game, about a cricket match, because you see visually more interesting action. It depends which cricket team it is that's playing, and it depends how many they've had in the pavilion before the game. But chess, to me, doesn't seem to be the kind of pastime that would lend itself very well to a musical, which is obviously going to have theatrical as well as musical sides to it.
Well, I would disagree most strongly that chess is not a dramatic game. It is a very dramatic game, and after all, it was supposed to have originated in about the 7th century as a illustration of war. It was actually, that's how it came about. People were using pieces to illustrate military moves. So as a game, it's about as dramatic as you can get. But I understand your point. The thing is that a lot of people don't understand how to play chess, and all they see is a couple of guys pushing counters round a board. But, of course, the piece is not in any way about chess, the game. It's about chess players and the world of chess.
The intrigues.
Yes, I mean, the battles, the characters who've got to the top, and the political problems, and, the feeling that the Russian character has that, to begin with anyway, I mean, his attitude changes. It's almost, as Björn said the other day in private conversation, it's almost a psychological musical in many respects. But we don't want it to sound too heavy. I mean, you don't have to understand chess. It's about people who get to the top in a field, and then the problems they face, and the field they're in happens to be chess, which, in addition to all the pressures of fame and fortune and things like that, there's the added pressure of the political side of things, because in Russia, as you probably know, chess players are about the most famous people that can be. I mean, your average chess player is revered as a hero. I mean, he can't walk the streets without being recognized.
In the synopsis for the production, and it's still a work in progress, so in a sense we haven't seen the final product, as it were, in live performance, the relationship between the American and the Russian isn't a good one at all. In fact, there's quite an aggression there between the two, and they dislike each other totally, don't they?
Well, that's an oversimplification, I think, but it's true to say that in all recent chess confrontations at World Championship level, there has been a really good, healthy element of out-and-out hatred, which adds spice to the competition. I mean, Korchnoi and Karpov loathed each other. Fischer loathed everybody. But they're not all evil, unpleasant personalities. I mean, actually, Karpov, who I've met twice, is a charming man, but he doesn't like Korchnoi very much. Boris Spassky, who Fischer beat, is a charming gentleman, and like a gentleman, he lost.
Benny, introduce, if you will, the first track, or the first part from chess, if you will, the musical, the anthem. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's the only song in this piece that we've had before we met him. I think the only one. Maybe we have some bars here and there, but... And I always wanted to record an anthem, but there was never room for it, right? It would be corny if ABBA would sing an anthem for no reason at all. This is no anthem in that respect, but to me it's I don't know how to describe this. I think it's the essence of what the music is in total, of the whole thing, I think. To me personally, that it is. And
with an anthem or with a musical, the theme of the production comes through in different ways, maybe lyrically or musically, different instruments or different renditions of the same theme. Is that in a sense what the anthem's about? In a sense it's the theme of chess, the musical, and it runs throughout. It's a way of recognizing the initial theme and then it repeats itself later on?
No, not really. I mean, it's a song on its own, and that is not repeated anywhere in the rest of the show. It's not like that. It's just, I feel that the essence of what's happening to those people, all of them actually, at least three of the three major parts, is the heart of that is in the anthem, although it's the Russian singing the anthem, as I see it, musically.
I mean, if I can make a serious point about this song, I feel that the older you get, I'm not implying that we're all, we're all clapped out in our bath chairs, but the older you get, I think your roots, where you came from, matters to you more than it did when you were a kid. When you're 20, you are an international person. I tend to find, certainly in my case, that you tend to think more about where you came from, what you're all about, and that's what this song is about. I mean, the Russian is leaving. He has left his country, but in another sense, he can't ever leave his country.
Björn, tell us what it's like to write now for a musical like this, as opposed to writing, say, 3 or 4 minute songs for an album or 3 or 4 minute singles for ABBA. Is it different for you to write something for the theatre?
It's very much different, and it's much more freedom, actually. We found that we could use almost any good idea that we came up with, whether it was classical or even semi-jazz. There was room for it in this, which there wouldn't have been on an ABBA album. So that's the big difference. In that respect, it was easier to write for this than for a 4 or 5 minute format singles album.
In a sense, the idea of Chess was Tim's. Did it bother you at all that you were writing music for somebody else's idea, somebody else's concept at the time, or were you just happy to be led on with that idea?
Oh, it didn't bother us in the least. On the contrary, it was fun to have that synopsis to work by. And that was what we were looking for anyway.
Tim, some of the singers are old friends of yours that you've worked with before, particularly Elaine Page, who sings on several of the songs. Was it because you're an old friend, because you're colleagues musically, that she was a natural choice for you to work with?
No. I'll answer for you, because this is quite amusing, because Björn and I thought, when we first started to talk about this project with Tim, that Elaine Page would be the perfect one to sing this role, right? I always loved her voice, and I think she's fantastic, and Tim didn't really mention it at all. So we said to Tim, without knowing that you knew Elaine more than that she was in Evita, that how about Elaine Page? Couldn't we ask her? The only thing that was against that was that she was involved in an earlier Tim Rice project, right?
Yes, and if you listen to this whole piece, you'll find that her part is a very difficult one. So it takes somebody who can perform, but at the same time has a brilliant technique. And then when you look around in the world, there are very few of those. So she was the one and the obvious choice for us.
Tell us about the part, Tim. What part does Elaine play?
Well, she plays the part of the second, or if you like, almost agent of the American player. That is her role at the beginning. She is the number 2, in a way, running the American's career. But he, of course, or not of course, he happens to be a very hard man to work for. He's very neurotic. And in the end, his behavior finally drives her to leave him. And simultaneously, she has become emotionally involved with the Russian. So, in fact, she changes sides. Of course, the Russian by then has defected to the West. So she is now dealing with a man who has defected and a man who is out of his natural environment. She's swapped that, if you like, for a neurotic man in his correct environment. So she is the key to the piece in the sense that she is the one who is emotionally involved with both of them, but in very different ways. She never had any affair with the American, even though they're about the same age. Their relationship is really more like a mother and awkward genius child.
Björn, take us through the song Nobody's Side, because that's a song that Elaine sings and in a sense reflects some of the things that Tim has just said.
In fact, that comes when at the point when the American has treated her badly, and when she finds that the Russian is not, a bad type at all, he's rather nice, and she finds that she's on nobody's side. She's just on her own side at that point, and it's rather an optimistic tune, which comes halfway through the first act.
Must be quite a privilege and something that you enjoyed a lot to work with Elaine, because I'm sure that you've respected her from afar, from one musician to another, from a performer to another. You've heard her singing Tim's and Andrew's songs, and having the opportunity of writing music which she would sing must have been quite nice for you.
Oh, yes, it was, and working with her was a terrific experience, because she's so fast and accurate, but still has, the warmth and gives the performance.
Talking about working with Elaine, Tim, for you with Andrew Lloyd Webber, what's the difference between, say, working with Andrew, who you've worked with a lot, and Benny and Björn from ABBA, who you'd never had the experience of working with before they strangle you?
Well, in terms of the way you go about it, there's not an enormous difference, because with Andrew it was the same formula, really, and we would get the plot first, and then Andrew would write some themes, and then I would put the lyrics to the tunes. That was the rough, simplified way of doing it. But I think one thing, without in any way making comparisons, because I had a wonderful time with Andrew and we were very successful, but I think one added advantage, apart from the fact there's one more brain to throw ideas around with, which helps, what I was given by Björn and Benny was something more than just a tune. I was usually given a lyric, not a serious lyric in many cases, but often there were great ideas or lines which Björn had come up with, which put me onto a good road, and one or two lines which I really thought, well, that's a great title, or that's a wonderful phrase. And it really set me off in a direction that I might not have thought of otherwise. So I think that's been a great asset, which I haven't had before. I mean, you can't expect composers to be, superb lyricists as well, but if they have a clue about words, it helps.
Chess is a work in progress, although you've actually decided on the particular pieces of music that you are going to release on the album. The production itself may end up using some of the tracks from the album and some new songs as well. Why have you put the project together like that?
Well, we wanted to make a record first, because we are record people. I mean, we know how to handle that, and that's the field where we have our experience. For me, I'd say that what's on the album, it's just over an hour and a half, is the essence of all the music we've written, right? There is another half hour in the can. And I should think that we might end up with using all of that material, or writing some new songs for the show, or maybe have some spoken parts in the show. I don't know.
What about its success or failure? Because the album comes out initially, and then live performances, hopefully, which we'll talk about in a minute. Live productions will come up, perhaps a tour or a residency in the West End. If the album's a failure, hopefully it won't be, but if there's a problem getting a single away, or the album isn't a success, then would it affect the production as well? Are you worried about that side of it?
Well, it would. We would have to reconsider if the album is a total flop, especially here in England, since we want to set it up on stage here to start with. So it has to be a hit or half hit for us to even consider having it on stage.
But sometimes musical productions have not always been successful initially, and then the stage production has helped them along, hasn't it, Tim?
I'm not sure I can think of too many examples of that. I think the reason we've done it this way, and other than what Benny said, is also that when you go straight to theatre, you have 8 or 9 things that you've got to get right at once. And it's very hard to do that. You've got to make sure that the set, the look of the show, the choreography, the lighting, hundreds of other factors, which are all very important. But none of these elements, absolutely none of them, I believe, including the direction, is quite as important at the end of the day as the music and the lyrics. And if we do a record, that's all that matters. I mean, obviously you've got to perform it well, but that's not difficult when you've got great artists. And all we have to worry about at the moment, which is a lot, is to make the score as great as we can. And if the score works, then we know that the other factors have got that much better chance of working. And also it gives us control. We can say, I mean, certainly with Evita, which I went the same route. I mean, there was no way any director could say, whoever he was, well, the first thing we do is drop Don't Cry For Me Argentina. I mean, he couldn't say that. So we hope that if the score is successful on record, that will be 90% at least of what goes into the theatre.
Another song from Chess features Murray Head, who's a name that has sadly not been as successful in Britain as in France, perhaps, where he has a recording career that's far more successful. He sings the song Bangkok, One Night in Bangkok. What's that song about, Björn?
This is the beginning of the second act. So it's the second World Championship chess held in Bangkok. And at this point he is not there in his capacity as a chess player. He's there privately or hired by a TV network. And the first one, the Bangkok song, is really fairly general about Bangkok and what's happening there.
It would be difficult for yourself and Benny to write songs that today wouldn't have any influences or any of the sounds of ABBA, and Bangkok in many ways, the chorus line, has that typical ABBA chorus sound to it. Something I'm sure ABBA fans will warmly receive, because I think they probably miss the sound of ABBA and the singles that you used to release, because you haven't released some for a while now, have you?
No, that's right. And, of course, I mean, we wrote the songs for ABBA. So people will spot a lot of ABBA in this, but it's not ABBA, it's Benny and me.
Tell us about Murray Head and how he came into the production, Tim, because you know Murray from previous things that you've worked on together.
Well, we had a lot of trouble thinking of somebody who could sing the part of the American. Had to be somebody who could sing rock, had to be somebody who could act, and also had a very good range, because as with Elaine's part, it's a difficult part to sing. And we thought about Murray because I remembered him from Superstar days. I haven't worked with him since then. And by good fortune, when we were coming to the point where we had to find somebody fairly soon, he had a concert in London, whereas he'd spent the last 5 years in France, where he's a big star. And we all went to see him at his concert, which was very impressive. And we played him some of the tunes, and he liked it, and we liked him, and that was it.
And the other singers and musicians, tell us about some more of those. I think Barbara Dixon also plays a part, a vocal part in the production as well.
Well, Barbara is featured on 2 pieces, and of course she is a very big name in her own right, in the theatre as well as on record. And sad to say, I would be surprised if someone of Barbara's stature would play that part on stage, because it is a small part, but it's a very important part. And on record, as with Dennis Quilley, who's a very distinguished actor, as you know, it's great to have these top people happy to play comparatively small roles on record. I mean, that's in a way, if you like, another bonus of doing the record, is you can get the best people to do 1 number or 2 numbers, whereas you would never get Dennis Quilley, quite rightly, to agree to do 10 minutes out of a show, when the last thing he did on the London stage in a musical was Sweeney Todd. He was the lead and was on stage the whole show.
Benny, tell us about some of the Swedish musicians and singers that are also involved, because they're friends of yours from home that are involved in this production.
Yes, I mean, we should talk about Tommy Körberg a little, because I feel that he is carrying this musical on his shoulders very much. Sure. He is one of the 3 leads, and his voice and the guy he is, and I hope that it will reach an audience far away from Sweden. The thing is that what he is doing is not what you would call obvious singles, right? You can't, I mean, he's singing the anthem, yes he is, but I mean, he's not doing any pop-oriented material at all in this, although he has the major part. And he is, how can I explain it? You better play a song with him, because I think he's a fantastic singer. Then there's another guy, a friend of ours, Björn, who was once in a group called Blue Swede, who's doing the part of the arbiter in the opening ceremony in the first act. Small part, but as Tim says, equally important to the others.
The song Pity the Child, tell us about that song. Talk that one up for me.
Well, I think you should ask Tim about that. Okay. He has...
Well, Pity the Child is the American's breakdown, if you like. Comes towards the end of the piece. And firstly, in the first half, we've seen him lose his title. We've seen him lose Florence, his assistant, and the woman who ran his life. He then comes to Bangkok, where the next championship is taking place, which doesn't involve him. And really, his main point in being in Bangkok is to try and get what he lost back, and to get some sort of revenge on both the Russian, who has stolen his title, and his support. And he spends the second half of the piece in various machinations, various deals. He tries every trick in the book to destroy the relationship between the Russian and Florence, and to put the Russian off. And it's implied that he is actually in league with the Soviets, who of course are also very angry that their man deserted. And everything fails. For the first time in his life, he doesn't get his way. And the result is that he lets out all his frustrations and tells his life story. And you can see that this complex wreck of a character is something that goes right back to when he was 9.
Is it a happy story, ultimately? Is it the sort of fairy tale story that ends happily ever after, or is it a modern-day story? And many of those modern-day stories that we live and see all the time don't end quite how we want them to.
No, I wouldn't say it's a happy story, but I think the characters played by Tommy and Elaine, the Russian and Florence, end up knowing more about themselves than they did. So they've got they've been, if you like, educated. They've come through the traumas of the piece in fighting condition, as it were. So you feel that there's optimism for them in their, for the rest of their lives, which is perhaps not true for the American. I think the American is perhaps the one who is most destroyed by the events, and maybe, who knows, he might be the one that gets the audience sympathy.
Heaven Help My Heart, Björn, if you'll do that one.
This is the second scene of the second act, when we find that the Russian and Florence are actually living together, which we didn't know before that. And it's the closest we get to a love ballad, really, in this piece. And she sings this about him and about the way they are.
Let's talk now about the production itself, because the album comes out very shortly, and I know that you're doing a number of selected concerts in Europe, primarily. So, Tim, if you will, tell us about those concerts first.
Well, really, I think I'm right in saying it was Benny's idea one night. Or was it Bjorn's?
Ours. It was ours.
Anyway. I wasn't there.
You're piggy in the middle.
I was late. But the point of the concert is twofold. One is to launch the record. And to launch the album, we could just play the tapes and show a few slides and things, which I've done in the past with projects, and that's fine. But the other thing we wanted to do was to hear the piece played live by the forces that it was written for, i.e. a Socking Great Symphony Orchestra, a rock section, a choir of 40 or 50, the soloists, the synthesizers, everything. And of course in the theatre, that will, I'm afraid, be totally impossible. I'm sure we'll be able to get a fantastic sound in the theatre, and it will be a big orchestra in the theatre and a big choir, but you couldn't, for economic reasons, possibly do it as exactly as it is on the record. So it's a chance for us to see or hear the piece in its true original form.
Where are the concerts going to be on, and what are the dates of them approximately? Which cities in Europe are you playing at?
Well, initially at the end of October, which is when the album comes out in Europe, we're playing 5 European cities, London, Paris, Amsterdam, Hamburg and Stockholm. And it's possible that we may repeat the process, the concerts in America and Australia in the new year, but that's not definite yet. But of course such an enterprise is totally uneconomic. I mean, it's insane in financial terms to take about 200 people around Europe. But which is why for the concerts alone we have actually got sponsorship, because otherwise we would lose something in the region of $500,000, which I don't think even we can bear with equanimity.
It is a costly exercise. I mean, just having gone into a recording studio and put these songs down onto tape has cost you money, and then indeed the concerts themselves, getting those performers, musicians' unions, etc., with orchestras and rock bands, it's costing a lot of money. Sponsorship has helped. Producing something like chess, though, is an extremely expensive thing, and also risky business in this day of high living and so on.
Yes, it is. Although we have the opportunity to do it at full scale, living from the successes we've had with our earlier things. I mean, we put every effort, every penny that we needed into this. And it's true, it's very expensive. On the other hand, there is no other way to fulfill your thoughts and your dreams of what this eventually could be if you don't spend all that money.
Taking the West End theatres as an example in London, now musicals are very much in and are very popular. There's a renewed interest in both old and new musical productions. Indeed, some of yours are still on in the West End, Tim. Because they're successful, it would also, I would assume, mean that the competition is even tougher for a new production like Chess to really settle in and be taken on board and endorsed by people.
I think that if a musical's good, it probably is an asset that there are other musicals on, because people, if they go to one musical, whoever wrote it, and they enjoy it, they're going to look around and say, I like that, are there any more? And I think if you come up with something good, you can have a hit at any time. But I think the fact that there might be 10 others not doing well won't make any difference if yours is good. If yours is bad, you'll flop, whatever else is going on.
The performers that are on the record, by and large, they will be the singers and performers that will be at these selected concerts throughout Europe. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. They'll be doing the concerts. Well, at least the 3 principals, Tommy Chauvet, Murray Head and Elaine Page, will be doing all the concerts.
Now, assuming it's a raging success, both the music on disc as well as the selected concerts, and you look into 85 and start thinking seriously about taking it into the West End or even to Broadway, will the same people be involved in it, do you think? Will they be able to commit themselves for 6 months or whatever?
Well, I hope so. I mean, it's very hard to say, but as I said before, I doubt, unfortunately, whether people like Barbara Dixon or Dennis Quilley would be able to turn up and play a very small part on stage. But the three leads are all very accomplished actors. Tommy is a very famous actor in Sweden, as well as being a very successful singer. And I would certainly think it would have to be somebody very good to replace any of them. But of course you can't tell a year ahead whether they'll be available. I mean, if Elaine or Murray or Tommy is offered the lead in something else, which is even better, heaven forbid, we can't say to someone of their stature, you have got to sign on the dotted line right now. But I'm glad to say they have all expressed great enthusiasm and interest in having the option to play the show, and I would be delighted, I'm sure we all would, if they were able to repeat their performances on stage.
Absolutely, I agree.
You mentioned earlier, Tim, that you've met some of our world-famous chess players at games. In fact, I've seen in your offices here photographs of you making the first move in a match. I wondered if they'd given you any ideas on how they felt about you doing a musical on their profession, if you like.
Well, there's been great interest by British chess players, and Britain is a very important chess centre. We've got some great players, not quite in the overall Russian league, but then who is in the Russian league? But the organisation and the depth of chess playing in this country is increasing all the time. And since it became known that I was working on this project, I've had lots of letters from the British Chess Federation and the Scottish Chess Federation and from individual grandmasters and international masters, one of whom, Bill Hartston, who is perhaps the most famous chess personality in England and does a regular chess television show. He was very enthusiastic, and he's actually written for the album an essay, just the history of chess, a very entertaining essay, which is useful background information for people who don't know much about the game. And they've all been very interested, and I've been asked to attend lots of chess functions. And I'm afraid, because I've been in Sweden a lot, I haven't had time to go to many of them, but I did go to one when Korchnoi was playing Kasparov in London, and I was asked to make the opening move for Kasparov. And he said to me in Russian, make this move, and I don't know if I made the right one because he lost.
Benny, do you play chess? Are you an avid follower of chess matches, and do you like to play yourself?
Yes, I play a little. I'm very bad at it, as Tim is. But I follow it, and I read the small notes in the papers about chess, and I always did. I don't really know why, because I'm not that... I don't have that much knowledge about chess in itself. But I play chess myself, yes.
I think there is a link between chess and music. I used to share a flat with a very distinguished concert pianist, John Lill, one of Britain's top pianists, and he was a chess fanatic and very good at it, and he used to come home at 3 o'clock in the morning from Sheffield or Birmingham, having driven all night from his concert, and he'd then put on Beethoven at full volume, wake me up and say, come on, let's have a game of chess. And I was dragged out of bed at 3 a.m. I was always on my own, of course, and forced to play against John. And not only was I asleep, he was also much better than me, so I never won. But I've come across many other musicians, often classical musicians rather than pop or rock musicians, who like chess. There's something rather satisfying about the construction of the whole piece, which almost ties in. This sounds a bit pretentious, but I think it's true. There's a kind of you can make a link between chess and a long piece of music. And there have been, over the years, lots of serious composers have written ballets and symphonies and concertos with chess themes.
And I mean, it's not just the game itself, which is a solid thing that runs right the way through, in a sense as a theme for any musical, but also the social things that go on around. The dissidents, the people crossing over from east to west to actually leave the country that they came from. So there's a lot more to chess than the actual game itself. One thing I wanted to know was that you were talking about the series of concerts, including the Barbican in London fairly soon, as being straight musical performances, really. There aren't going to be any production sides to it. There aren't going to be any stage props, for example. But do you have any ideas, looking into the future, what kind of production chess will be when it hits the West End, for example?
Well, what I'm sure it won't be is a chessboard with people dressed up as kings and queens and pawns. I mean, absolutely not.
Alice in Wonderland.
Right. To be honest, I don't know is the answer, and this, of course, is what you want a director for. I mean, when we worked on Evita, we were very fortunate to get Hal Prince, who is one of the greatest musical directors in the world, and Hal did a wonderful job, and I didn't really see it the way he did, but as soon as he did it, I thought, well, of course, that's the only way you could do it. It's very hard because we're not directors, but what we want is a great director like Hal or somebody of his stature who will work with us, as Hal did on Evita, and make suggestions, and we can say, well, yeah, we like that or we don't like that. And we'll have to wait and see how it works visually.
This is what I like most, this collaboration with Tim and with everybody. That if you compare it with making a pop with ABBA, we carry the whole thing, right? From the beginning to the end of the project. While in this case, there is another fellow writing the story and the lyrics, and there's a conductor, an orchestrator, Anders Elias, who is a brilliant young Swedish fella. There will be a director who will add things to this. There will be a choreographer. There will be a lot of people that we are surrounded by that would help this piece to become even better than we think it is, I guess. And this is very enthusiasmating. Is that the word? Yes.
Yes.
In ABBA, you were no stranger to live performance yourself and have done many shows in front of thousands of people all over the world. Are you, in a sense, sitting back feeling a little frustrated that perhaps you'd like to be up on stage performing yourself as well?
No. On the contrary, I mean, I really enjoy not having to do that, not having to do interviews, things like that, you know. But I'm going to be on stage when we do the concerts because I just can't resist that, being in the middle of this full symphony orchestra and choir and doing this piece. So I look forward to that very much.
I Know Him So Well is the last song that we're going to pick as a selection from Chess. Tim, if you will lead us through that one.
Well, this was one of the very first lyrics I wrote, even though it comes quite near the end of the show. And very simply, it's the song sung by two women, both of whom are singing about the same man. There's Elaine Page is singing the part of the Russian's mistress, Florence, realizing that things are coming to an end. And the Russian's wife, who has been deliberately planted in Bangkok by the Soviets, possibly with the collusion of the American. And she also feels that their relationship is at an end. So these two women are both singing about the same man, saying, I know him so well. But they both have different ideas of what he is, and really they're both only seeing a part of him.
I have a wish that you should play the quartet, which is a short thing that Elaine, Tommy, Björn Skiffs, and Dennis Quilley is doing, just for amusement, because I think that's one of the small favorite pieces I have on this record. That's all I wanted to say.
As a songwriter, you and Björn have written many famous songs with ABBA, and now this new project takes you into an entirely different sphere of writing for music. Is this something that you will want to do now in the future, and that is to write for theatrical or musical productions rather than just writing pop songs for radio and TV?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that, really. This has been so consuming for 2 years, or more than 2 years, and it will still take us another year before this is coming alive on stage. So I wouldn't know. It's obviously, if this goes well, if people enjoy the work we've done, I should think that we'd make another one. I look forward to do that. But on the other hand, I mean, I would like to continuously write music, and pop songs or accordion songs or whatever, just to... There is... it's the only thing I can do, and it's what else is... What's the choice? I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's a musical that starts at one point and ends 2 hours later with consistent flow of music, or if it's just a pop tune. It's the same thing. It has the same ingredients, and it takes the same 100% effort.
Tim, you've worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Stephen Oliver, and now with Benny and Bjorn, and all of those people are very different in their character and the way they write. I would have imagined for you is a very interesting way of being a lyricist and meeting different people, socialising in a different way and writing different concepts altogether. Do you see it leading on to something eventually, or do you find that it's just a journey that you're taking and meeting different and interesting ideas along the way?
I think like Benny, I can never be certain of what I'm going to do next. I think about the time of Evita, I probably thought I was going to work with Andrew forever and do 10 or 12 musicals and then die. That didn't happen. That didn't happen, and I'm, obviously there are regrets that partnership didn't survive, but at the same time, now, I'm very glad it didn't, because it has been a very different experience working first with Stephen and then with Björn and Benny, and who knows what will happen, but if this is successful, then I would hope maybe in 3 or 4 years' time we might say, well, let's try again. But there are other things I'd like to do. I mean, I want to do some writing of books, and pursuing 1 or 2 other interests. But for the next year, barring, heaven forbid, disasters, 99% of my time will be taken up on this project.